Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be counting down the top 10 fastest sports classic cars in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now again, similar to my supercars video, this does not mean top speed. This means lap time on a racetrack. The 10 cars on this list are going to give you the best fighting chance to win races in Grand Theft Auto Online within the sports classic category. Before we get into the video, I'm sure many of you are wondering, why does your character look so different? Well, I've actually had to make a second character because I've run out of garage space. So I made a new character, bought a new garage, and filled it up with a bunch of cars, so that I can make these list style videos for you guys on various different topics. Anyway guys, let's get into it. We're going to start off with number 10. Alright guys, starting off with number 10, we of course have the ENUS Silvia. Obviously this thing is at number 10, so it is the slowest car on this list. However, it's only the 10th slowest in the entire game. It's still pretty good. Now this thing really won't give you a fighting chance within sports classic races in this game. Unfortunately, it's really not that fast. However, it is still a really cool car. Now my car is pretty bare bones because I just bought it, basically changed the color, put window tint on it, and here we are. But there is a ton of customization that you can actually do to this car, which makes it a pretty cool car to own in this game. Obviously what we're counting down though is in terms of lap time. So this thing will beat a majority of the sports classic cars in this game when it comes to actually racing. Overall, I am a pretty big fan of the Silvia. I actually did have one on my other character. However, I did have to sell it because I was running out of space. The Silvia does handle really well once you get some suspension upgrades on it and a spoiler. It's actually a really underrated car in my opinion. Anyway guys, I would definitely recommend picking up a Silvia. It is a really good car. Cool little two-seater, Japanese sort of styled car. It's honestly really sick. Anyway guys, that is it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Alright guys, then at number 9 we have the Lampadaddy VSAUCE. This thing is pretty darn good. I really like the actual look of the VSAUCE. I don't know what just happened to that civilian right there, but they just completely binned it. Interesting. Overall, the VSAUCE is definitely a car that I would recommend to pick up. It does have really good acceleration, really good handling as well. I am a pretty big fan of this car. It's made a pretty quick impression on me, but it does handle really well. So it's no wonder to me that this thing is the 9th fastest sports classic car in Grand Theft Auto Online. The thing handles well, accelerates well. It's got a nice kind of weight to the steering. I don't know how to describe it, but I would say the steering has like a nice weight to it, if you guys know what I mean. It's a really good looking car as well. I feel like I never see any players driving this thing, so it's definitely a car that I'm going to be driving a lot more. I wasn't super aware of this thing until I started doing research into this before making this video. So the VSAUCE, pretty darn cool car. I would recommend picking this thing up guys. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, that's it for number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Alright guys, next up at number 8 we have the Ocelot Swinger. Honestly, I gotta say before we even get into this is a really good looking car. It's such a classic looking car, it perfectly fits in the sports classics category in my opinion. This thing's pretty awesome. And of course it is the 8th fastest sports classic car in the entire game, so it's earned its place on this list for sure. Now as far as acceleration and handling go, it's pretty good, man. My one complaint is it does almost feel a little bit understeery, but to a degree it's like not even understeer. I think it's just the wheels have so much grip that it almost feels like understeer, but it's not really understeer. I don't know how to describe it, but if you guys have a Swinger, you probably know what I'm talking about. Now when you start going at higher speeds, you can actually definitely feel the understeer, but at lower speeds it's not too bad. The other thing is this car does feel a little tiny bit, what do I want to call it, light I guess? It goes up in the air quite a lot, which is not necessarily a great thing, but it's not the worst thing ever. It's not really that annoying, but it is something that I noticed and I thought I would make mention of. Overall, the Swinger is pretty good. I would say that this thing is maybe worth picking up. However, there are some cars that are obviously a lot faster than this thing, hence it being at number 8. Let's get into number 7. Because I think it's going to be a little bit better. Alright guys, next up at number 7 we of course have the Pagassi Torreira. This thing is absolutely awesome. It's based off of a Lamborghini Countach in real life, and it is a pretty darn good sports classic car. Obviously not the fastest, however not the slowest either. The Torreira is a car that I have actually owned for quite some time in Grand Theft Auto Online. However, I did end up selling it a few months back because I needed garage space. But for the time that I owned it, it was actually a really nice car. It handles pretty well despite it being a really weird kind of looking car. I mean, the Countach is cool, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of weird looking. Now, the Torreira definitely will outperform the previous 3 cars on this list. It is just faster and it handles a little bit better than each one of them, so it's definitely more worth picking up than the rest of those cars. However, looks-wise, I personally think that the Countach is not that great looking of a car. I understand that it's insane looking and stuff, which makes it a little bit more... I feel like some of the other cars further back on this list looked a little tiny bit better than this thing. However, performance-wise, this thing is a little bit better. So if you're planning on doing some races, this is the car that you are going to want out of the last couple that we've gone over. Like I said, handling is good, acceleration is good, top speed is decent as well. Overall, the Torreira, pretty darn good car. Anyway guys, I think that is pretty much it for number 7. Let's move on to number 6. Alright guys, next up, the number 6th fastest car in Grand Theft Auto Online within the Sports Classics category is of course the Vapid Retinue Mark II. Now I'm not going to lie to you guys, I personally don't really love the Vapid Retinue Mark II. I don't think it's a very great looking car. Mine is not customized at all, other than the spoiler on the back. Maybe I just haven't customized this thing a crazy amount. However, I have done a customization of this vehicle before, and overall, it's just not one of the best looking cars ever. I appreciate the car, I think it's cool, but it's not really one of the best looking cars ever. And honestly, I'm surprised that it is this high on this list as far as performance goes, because I personally don't really like how this thing handles. However, I have heard some people swear by the Vapid Retinue Mark II, so here it is. Now, acceleration wise, it is pretty quick, I gotta say. However, handling wise, that is where I don't really understand, because the handling on this car is a little weird. It's got kind of a lot of grip, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it should handle as well as it kind of does. In some instances, it has a lot of grip and it really helps the handling. In other instances, it has a lot of grip and the handling is just really weird. So overall, I'm not a super huge fan of the Retinue Mark II, but I'm not one to deny facts. And the Vapid Retinue Mark II is in fact the 6th fastest sports classic car in the entire game. So here it is on the list. Anyway guys, I think that is pretty much it for number 6. Let's move on to number 5. Alright guys, at number 5 we have the Pagassi Infernus Classic. This is one of the better looking cars on this entire list in my opinion, and obviously it's at number 5, so it is one of the better performing cars as well. Overall, the acceleration of this vehicle is pretty darn good. The handling is a little bit less good than the acceleration. However, it is still not bad. Overall, I am a pretty big fan of the Infernus Classic because it's really just a cool car, and for it to be this high on the best sports classic cars list is really, really nice as well. As you can see with the handling, the back end of this car kind of likes to slide out on you on occasion, which can be slightly annoying. However, if you do put a spoiler option on this thing, it does help a little tiny bit. As well as if you put a suspension option on, that will help also. But the Infernus Classic is definitely not the best handling car ever. It seems to have a lot of weight over the rear wheels, which makes sense because that's kind of where the engine is. So it kind of makes sense that it is not the best handling car ever. But regardless of the handling being a little bit less than optimal, the acceleration and the top speed on this car are both pretty darn good. The acceleration definitely better than the top speed, but still they go kind of hand in hand, and they are both very, very good. Anyway guys, I think that is pretty much it for the Infernus Classic. This is a car that I would probably recommend picking up if you have some extra money lying around. However, if you are trying to win races, I don't think that I would recommend this thing just because on sharper corners, that tail end just really likes to slide out on you. So anyway guys, that is it for number 5. Let's move on to number 4. Alright guys, and at number 4 we have one of my favorite cars on the entire list, and that is the Sterling GT. The Sterling GT is one of the best sounding cars in all of Grand Theft Auto Online. It's absolutely incredible. And of course, it is the 4th fastest sports classic car in the entire game, which is very, very good. Now overall, the Sterling GT is one of the cars that I would recommend the most on this list overall. It is a great free mode cruising vehicle, as well as it is the 4th fastest sports classic car, so you could take this thing into a race and potentially do pretty well, depending on how bad the people you are racing against are and how good of a driver that you actually are. This thing also has a little bit of customization that you can do to it to make it a bit more your own, which is a nice feature to have, especially on a car like this. The Sterling GT is absolutely fantastic. It is regarded as the best sounding car in the entire game by very, very many people. And it is also one of the best looking cars in the entire game as well, at least in my opinion. This thing is absolutely classic. I can't recommend it enough, guys. Anyway, that is it for number 4. Let's move on to number 3. Alright guys, next up at number 3 we have the Rapid GT Classic. Honestly, until I started doing research for this video, I did not realize that the Rapid GT Classic was one of the fastest sports classic cars in the entire game. I really had no idea. But since I've owned it, I can honestly say I understand why it is. This thing's acceleration is absolutely fantastic. It has a pretty good top speed as well, and the handling of this vehicle is not bad at all. If you put suspension options on this thing as well as spoiler options, you can make this thing handle very, very nicely. It also sounds pretty decent and it looks pretty decent as well. Overall, I am a pretty big fan of the Rapid GT Classic. This thing is pretty awesome, and I really wish that I knew about it a little bit more before I started doing research for this video, because it's a really, really cool car. I would definitely recommend picking it up. Anyway guys, that is it for number 3. Let's move on to number 2. Alright guys, at number 2 we have the Grotty Cheetah Classic. This is one of my favorite sports classic cars in the entire game. It's also one of my favorite customizations I've ever done on my main character. I have one of these that looks very similar to this, except the blue is ultra blue instead of racing blue. Now the Cheetah Classic is the second fastest sports classic car in the game, and I can vouch for it. I have used this thing in many races and it absolutely destroys. If you're playing against people who don't have a Cheetah Classic or the vehicle at number 1, you will win the race with this thing pretty much. It is very, very hard to win against a Cheetah Classic with any other car. This thing is absolutely fantastic. It has a ton of customization that you can do to it as well, which is a very nice feature. And overall, it's just a great looking car. It's based off of a Ferrari Testarossa, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I'm not super good with my old Ferraris, but I believe it is based off of a Testarossa, and maybe a bit of the F355 Berlinetta, I believe it's called. If you're a Ferrari enthusiast, let me know in the comments down below if I got that right or if I'm completely dead wrong. Overall, the Grotty Cheetah Classic is a car that I absolutely recommend. This thing is certified. I can vouch for it. It is an awesome vehicle. And if you plan on racing, you can win a lot of races with this vehicle. Anyway guys, that is it for number 2. Let's move on to number 1. Alright guys, and at number 1 we have the Grotty Turismo Classic. This is the best sports classic car in Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of racing. It absolutely shreds. Like I mentioned with the Cheetah, this thing is basically the Cheetah Classic, but it does everything that the Cheetah Classic does, just a little tiny bit better. However, both vehicles are competitive, I will say. However, the Turismo is just better. So guys, if you are going to do sports classic races in Grand Theft Auto Online, get yourself a Turismo Classic if you want to win. This thing literally gives you so many advantages over all of the other vehicles. It has better acceleration and better handling than the Cheetah Classic, and a top speed that is very, very similar to that car as well. Of course, the Turismo Classic is based off of a Ferrari F40, which is one of the most classic Ferraris of all time, and one of the most sought after. I absolutely love my Turismo R. I have one on my main character as well. I just bought one on this character to show it off in this video. Overall, the Turismo Classic is an absolutely fantastic car. You should definitely pick one of these things up if you are interested in older Ferraris, if you're interested in winning sports classic races, if you're interested in cars in GTA, if you're interested in cars in real life. Basically, the bottom line is you should own a Turismo Classic no matter what. Absolutely fantastic car. Would 100% recommend picking this thing up over any other car on this list. It's absolutely perfect. Anyway guys, there you have it. That has been the top 10 fastest sports classic cars in terms of racing in Grand Theft Auto Online. If you guys enjoyed this video or if you found it useful, a like is of course appreciated. Dislike if you didn't. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.